Winter 1953. It is New Year's Eve at Westflower Hall in central Beijing, and Premier Zhou Enlai is working late, as he often does. He sees a world divided. The greatest war in history has just left Germany and Japan in ruins and Europe exhausted. China suffered deeply in this war and fought hard to win its independence. Great challenges remain. Korea, Vietnam, India, the Middle East all face new conflicts. America and the Soviet Union are locked in a deadly struggle, armed with nuclear weapons. The nations of Africa, Asia, and South America yearn for independence. All around the world, the potential disaster of war casts a shadow on the people. Zhou Enlai sits at his desk in the icy Beijing winter and asks himself, is there a better way? Are there any principles on which all nations can agree as a foundation for lasting peace? Zhou Enlai is a student of history. He has studied widely in Japan and Europe. He is also a student of Chinese tradition, heir to a family of scholars that goes back 1,000 years. He uses this knowledge as he writes the 5 Principles of Peace. The 5 principles are based on ideas from the League of Nations, the Brand-Kellogg Treaty, and the United Nations. They also draw their depth and harmony from ancient Chinese understanding of the 5 elements. The first principle: mutual respect for each nation's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Like the earth element, each nation's land is fundamental. We all have the right to walk on this land and seek our destiny in the land of our birth. The second principle: mutual non-aggression. We should discuss, listen, negotiate, and compromise, and not use force against each other. Like the metal element, we use the sharpness of the sword of intelligence and respect, which is far more powerful than the sword of steel. The third principle: mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs. We respect each other's unique traditions, culture, and history, and our individual ways of solving our own challenges. Like the water element, we flow around the rocks of our differences. The fourth principle: equality and mutual benefit. The first 3 principles have developed a framework of respect and tolerance. Each nation is equal. Regardless of size or wealth, we help each other grow with sustainable economic and social development. Like the wood element, which is useful to all, creating wealth and practical benefits. The fifth principle: peaceful coexistence. Now we can see the goal of peace, achieved by living in harmony alongside each other. The meaning of coexistence is that we recognize our differences, our diversity, and we celebrate them. Like the element of fire, the nations are forged together, with heat for security and light for the mind. The first practical application of the 5 principles was in a critical treaty between China and India in April 1954. Their adoption helped to solve some difficult diplomatic issues. Zhou Enlai then took the 5 principles to a historic conference in Bandung, Indonesia in 1955, where they were expanded and endorsed by more than 50 countries in the non-aligned movement. The intelligence, energy, and patient persuasion of Zhou Enlai made this possible. The Bandung nations were very different in many ways. Thailand and Indonesia, Turkey and India, Ghana and Egypt, they had many different policies, but they all agreed on Zhou Enlai's 5 principles. Premier Zhou Enlai spent many years persuading more nations to accept the 5 principles. He traveled all over Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia, and ultimately more than 100 nations joined the non-aligned movement, representing nearly 2/3 of humanity, with the 5 principles at their heart. The 5 principles were part of the Geneva Conference, and they were reaffirmed in the Shanghai Communique, which brought the United States and China toward full diplomatic relations. They were endorsed by the United Nations, are part of the framework of the World Trade Organization, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and many other international organizations. In 2004, the 5 principles were thoroughly analyzed at a major symposium in China. In 2012, many of the Bandung nations reunited in Indonesia to celebrate people's diplomacy in light of the 5 principles. The 5 Principles of Peace is one of the most important documents in history to advance the cause of human development. Zhou Enlai himself said, "If these principles were applied not only between various countries, but also in international relations generally, they would form a solid foundation for peace and security, and the fears and apprehensions that exist today would give place to a feeling of confidence." The work continues. Today, the issues that challenge the world are globalization, trade balance, currency and debt, the environment and resources, energy and international terrorism. The 5 Principles of Peace provide guidance for these issues today, as they did 60 years ago. China has taken its place among the leaders of the world and has assumed its responsibility to be a strong, patient advocate for peace. With the vision of its first premier and first foreign minister in mind, China will serve the whole world. By helping everyone to understand the effective simplicity of the 5 principles and rededicating to their wisdom, the people of China will live their destiny, first seen far away on that bitter Beijing night in 1953 by Zhou Enlai, to be peacemakers for the world.